What's
Yeah,
happening
you're
over
good to go.
Okay.
Well, Sam Shaw, creator of Manhattan on WGN, I got to ask you about this before we get into the specifics of the show. How in the world did you pull this off? A period piece with lots of intrigue and mystery. It's got all the right look, the right feel, but you're on WGN, which wasn't known for original content.
Well, that's true. I mean, the short answer is it took an enormous amount of work on the part of a huge number of people. You know, I mean, TV is a team sport, and particularly to pull off a show this complicated with a big ensemble cast and a big elaborate world that we had to build and to produce it for basic cable. It was a huge challenge. So I feel very lucky to get to work with some really talented people. At the top of the list, Tommy Schlamme, who had a really clear vision for how to put the show together and make it work.
Well, I want to ask you about him in a moment. He's one of my favorite people, directors, behind-the-scene people on TV in the last 15 years or more. But talking about WGN, it reminds me so much of AMC, a few years ago. The same, I'm sure Matt Weiner had the same questions coming off Sopranos. Why would you want to go with that network? They have never done anything of any quality, of any originality, and now you look back and go, well, yeah, that's one of the best ones going. But he didn't know that. Like you're a trailblazer here for this new programming for WGN.
Well, I mean, there are two answers. The first is, I thought a lot about Mad Men and AMC, and the truth is, there's been a series of really brilliant shows that have trailblazed new ground on networks that haven't really been known for original programming. And it started with HBO back in the day, and then FX, with The Shield and Nip Tuck, and then AMC, and more recently Sundance has produced some incredibly brilliant TV over the last few years. I never would have guessed that Sundance would be responsible for my favorite TV of the last year in Top of the Lake, which I loved. So
who would have thought Netflix and Amazon?
Oh, and to say nothing for those as well. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of the Wild West. So interestingly, although WGN didn't have a pedigree, there was sort of a pedigree for new networks taking chances on creators and making really exciting television. So for us, for me and for Tommy, it was really gratifying to get to be a part of defining what the future of this network could look like. And then the other answer is, for us, they loved the project. They really seemed to get what it was and want to encourage us to make the best version of the show that we love, that we could make. And they also gave us an offer we couldn't refuse, which is the opportunity to go straight to series, which I think affected the show that we created in countless ways, just in terms of the way we were able to approach the storytelling, to not be burdened with a lot of the requirements of making a pilot, where there's a reason why you see a lot of pilots that are these big narrative mega mansion sales devices, and then a few episodes in, the paint starts to peel off and the roof starts to cave in because there hasn't been a lot of thought to how you build a series.
Well, that's true, and I would imagine also doing a period piece. I bet you had friends or industry people go, for your first series, don't do a period piece. You've got costumes to worry about. You've got props. You've got the look of it. I mean, everything has to be just right to bite off as your first one.
It's enormously difficult at every level. I mean, it's a lot of fun, too, I have to say, for me and for the other writers and the directors, too. There's a huge amount of pleasure in the research. But it's a big job, and it's a big job for everyone at every level on the crew and for the cast as well. So, we had a high degree of difficulty with this one. To say nothing about atomic physics, I have to confess that I am many things, but a nuclear physicist is not one of them. So that is its own learning curve.
Got to get the right advisors on that.
That is absolutely right. That's right.
Well, before we move on to specifics on the show, I have a lot of questions there, but before we move on, we do a lot of award stuff on our site, and I'm really feeling like, all the Guild Awards will be coming up soon, whether it's art directors to, visual effects to costumes. I feel like, don't you, that your team will be rewarded across the board at a lot of those?
Well, look, obviously I'm not impartial. I'm so proud of the show that we made, and I feel so lucky to be able to work with the people that I get to work with. From our brilliant costumer, Alonzo Wilson, to our production designer, Ruth Ammons, and Tommy has been so incredibly brilliant in putting together a crew that is just astonishing at every level. So, I'll leave the handicapping to others, but it would be terrific to see some of that work get recognized, and I'm gratified that there's as much talk about that as there is.
Well, we've mentioned Tommy a couple of times for folks that don't know all the background. I mean, he's done a lot of shows, but I think the most important in his career so far would probably be The West Wing. Yeah. Getting somebody like that on board that's launched shows, that knows what they're doing, that's won Emmy Awards, how critical was that to you?
It was essential, really. I mean, this is a show that I've been living with for a lot of years. It's been a huge labor of love for me. I wrote a first draft of the first episode, in 2008 or 2009, and it evolved, but it was always an enormous puzzle to figure out how to make it producible anywhere, even with a huge premium cable budget, but particularly on basic cable. Tommy, besides being just a masterful storyteller and a great partner, and he's a great partner and friend to me, he also had a really clear vision for how we could produce this show, and we did something really unusual. It was really exciting, which is that rather than shoot a show that that is filmed on a hermetically sealed soundstage, the way that particularly most period shows have to be, that we would build a world and inhabit that world. So essentially, we did what the Army did when they set up Los Alamos and built the first atomic bomb. Is that we built a town, and we shot in that town, and all the buildings had 4 walls, and they were real, and there was dust, and there were jeeps driving by, and I think that verisimilitude and that texture, I mean, you can sort of taste the dust in your teeth while you watch our show, and I think that's a credit to Tommy and to this very clear picture he had when we first started talking about the show.
Well, that whole creative team, if you just said, watch this, don't even have the sound up, the look of it, the grayness, just the whole style of it, you would know that it was not in present day, and you would know that it's probably somewhere in the southwest portion of the U.S. just by the color scheme.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talk a lot about New Mexico. We shoot our show in New Mexico, and we talk a lot about New Mexico and the landscape as a character in our show. I mean, the truth is, I think New Mexico was a character in the story of the development of the atomic bomb. It was so fundamental to the experience, this sort of surreal Twilight Zone experience of these physics geniuses who were plucked up from their lives and moved their families to this kind of proto-suburb surrounded by barbed wire fences on top of a dead volcano to build this secret weapon that was either going to save humanity or destroy it. But many of them had never been any place like New Mexico before, and you feel that when you're shooting there. It's a great gift to us that you look around and you could be in a spaghetti western, or you could be, in a 1950s sci-fi movie. It's sort of Forbidden Planet. It's a really remarkable place, and it's been a gift to us to be able to shoot there.
The people of that area and the people, I guess the children, maybe grandchildren of that area, have they been a source of information and so forth for you in writing?
Yeah, absolutely. Really for all of us. I mean, one of the coolest things about shooting this show the way that we have, we have a few locations. We have this 11-acre set that has been built on the site of an old defunct 1940s era military hospital, and then we have a ranch where we do a lot of shooting too. But I would say, 1 out of every 3 members of our crew has some personal connection to Los Alamos, to the history of the bomb, whether it's a grandparent who worked there, and so there's just a huge amount of learning that takes place just on set, and it's a great gift to our cast. It's great for the writers too and the directors, and we just feel steeped in the history shooting there.
The subject matter being well, I want to phrase it this way: race against time is what I keep reading in your press materials. But to build the atomic bomb. But what I love about it is a race against time, and you can tell that on the faces of the characters. But it's way slowed down for the audience. It's like a race against time. Let's say like in our own lives. You've got so many busy things going on a given day. But if you really looked at it from afar, it's kind of a slow pace. everyday kind of environment. I love that juxtaposition that you've got going on there.
Well, I mean, it's something we talk a lot about in the writers' room, which is that this is a show about a huge, towering piece of American history, world history. I mean, we say very often, thinking about how to construct stories, it's not a show so much about the end of World War II as it is a kind of origin story about the moment when we became the America that we are now, which sounds very lofty and kind of highfalutin. But it's really important to us in telling the stories to bear in mind that for the characters, Tuesday in November is a Tuesday in November, which means that if you get a run in your stocking on the day of Pearl Harbor, your story in part is going to be about your embarrassment because you show up to an interview and you have a run in your stocking. I mean, bearing in mind that the scale of the storytelling is always human. And that these characters are living their lives, and they're getting into fights with their spouses, and they're keeping secrets, and they're jockeying for position with their coworkers. And that's the sort of human reality of this moment. It just happens that it's all taking place in the shadow of this enormously terrifying and pressure-filled race against the Nazis to develop this incredible weapon.
Well, and as viewers, we have the advantage over the characters of knowing the eventual outcome. They don't know where all of this is really leading.
Right. And I have to say, to me, in researching subject matter, I spent years reading everything I could and talking to people, and there are incredible historical resources at our disposal. One thing that I found really poignant was to really understand how utopian a lot of the intentions of the physicists who were involved in developing this weapon were. I mean, a lot of them really believed that they were going to cure the world of the evil of war forever, which is, in hindsight, a very different picture from the picture of the past 70 years that we all know.
I want to ask you about your cast. John Benjamin Hickey is your main character, and I'm always fascinated with casting because here's a guy we've all seen in so many projects, but he's always that character actor, that guy you go, hey, I always like him in whatever he's in. How did you know he could lead your show?
Well, a few things. I mean, I've been a huge fan of his for a while, but like you, I mean, I see him in occasionally in smaller roles where he just sort of commands your attention when he's on screen. He had a fantastic recurring part on The Good Wife, which is a show that I love. But he also is a leading man. I mean, he won a Tony Award for Best Actor for The Normal Heart, and is an extraordinary stage actor. I think part of it was, he's a guy very early in the process who I was excited to talk to about this role, and for various reasons, he sort of initially seemed interested but passed. I think he wanted to do a comedy, which doesn't surprise me. He's a guy who has incredible gravitas as a dramatic actor. He's incredibly funny, too, and a wit, and he's a great comic actor. Anyway, we circled back kind of later in the process, and he read then a couple more scripts. We produced a few more, and we sat down with him, and I knew it immediately. I knew he was this guy. And part of it is it was so important to us that the person who is at the center of the world of this show feel credible, not only as a genius, a kind of once-in-a-generation mind. And John plays that brilliance so brilliantly, I think. But also feel like a human figure who could carry the enormous moral weight of this story. I mean, because it's a story about an incredibly morally complicated moment in our history. And, John, he just has a kind of, for lack of a better word, a deep, deep soulfulness that I felt the first moment we sat down with him. I knew it was really exciting to me, having spent years with this project and with this character, to kind of meet him for the first time and meet the character.
What I thought was so smart about the casting, going back to what I said a moment ago, the character itself, himself, Frank, is within the world of acting, would be that character actor that has to step forward and take the lead.
Well, that's exactly right. That's exactly right what you've just said. I mean, we tell a story over the course of this first season that involves a kind of horse race between Frank, who has a kind of ragtag group of scientists working under him, and a much more polished physicist, Reed Akeley, played by David Harbour, who has a much larger team of scientists and all the resources he could possibly want at his disposal. And there really is a sense of the sort of the fair-haired boy in Akeley and this other character in Frank, who, really, because of his own temperament, has basically he's been kind of running uphill his whole life. You have a sense that nothing has come particularly easy for him. And I think you feel that with John, too. There's a sense of the struggle and the effort in John that for me, I found incredibly captivating to watch.
And going the other direction, his own mentor, played by Daniel Stern, loved the interactions between those two.
I have to say, there are a lot of great gifts for me as a writer in getting to work on this show. None of them greater than getting to write for this cast of actors. I mean, the whole ensemble. I obviously I'm not objective here, but I think they're one of the great ensembles that's ever been on television. And Danny Stern is incredibly brilliant as Glenn Babbitt. I mean, every time we would write a scene for those two together, for John Benjamin Hickey and Daniel Stern, we would just kind of sit gleefully waiting to watch it because they were so fascinating together. There's such a sense of this deep connection between the two of them. And in some ways, I think Daniel Stern is a kind of the heart morally of our show. I mean, there's a great sense of his humanity that he brings to that role, along with great humor. Also, one of the truly great beards that's ever been on television, I think. When he first came in, which is his own beard, I must say, when he first came in to read for us, and I saw this sort of Talmudic kind of scholarly thing that he'd grown, and said, "Well, should I cut it for the part?" And said, "God, no, don't touch that beard."
That is the most unique beard I think I've seen on TV in a couple of decades. Does the beard have its own contract?
Yeah.
I want to go back in your career, just a year ago, really. Writers Guild nomination for Masters of Sex. In fact, one of the episodes you wrote for that show, I've interviewed about everybody on that show over the past 12 months, but Catherine, I thought, was their best episode of the whole first season. And just talk about working on that show, another period piece where you have a blend of real characters and fictional characters, but also what that did for you in terms of getting you ready to do your own show.
It was enormously helpful. I mean, first of all, I should just say I absolutely loved working on Masters and loved working for Michelle Ashford, who created that show, and is brilliant and a great friend. Like, the only job for which I ever would have left that job is this one, the chance to make this show that I've been living with for so long. But and Catherine, by the way, was a particularly great experience because I co-wrote it with Michelle. It was really it's a deeply emotional episode as well as a funny episode, but I loved getting a chance to work on that with her. The show is an incredible training ground for Manhattan. I mean, oddly, given that one of them is about sex and the other one is about this act of kind of terrible violence, this weapon of mass destruction and its origin story. The shows actually have a lot of shared DNA, I think. They're both period shows set in the middle of the century, and they both combine aspects of history and fiction. And so the process of watching that show take shape over its first season was kind of instrumental in helping me to think about how we would build the first season of Manhattan.
Well, the other thing I find, of course, you could also make the science comparisons too, but just the world of delving into secrets, people being secretive, they both share that as well.
Well, it's true. I mean, look, the two greatest taboos in our culture are sex and death. They are two completely immutable facts of human life that everybody on this planet shares. Even those who are celibate are the product of somebody else's sex, and we're all going to die. Those are the two things that are sort of guaranteed, and somehow we have a lot of trouble talking about them. They're very they're topics that are attended by a lot of fear and anxiety, and they produce secrecy and secrets. And so I think you're right. I think it's interestingly, they're both shows that deal in some fundamental level with the way that we acculturate ourselves to big facts that we have a hard time reckoning with. And in our show, I mean, it happens that the levels of secrecy are even ratcheted up to a more fevered pitch than they were, in the world of Masters of Sex, which involved its own secret scientific project. But yeah, they're kind of cousins.
Yeah, as a writer, I mean, you've got to. I mean, secrets and lies are your trademark. I mean, that's the world of drama.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I think fundamentally in life as well as in drama that the things people choose not to tell each other are often a lot more telling and a lot more interesting than the things that we choose to tell each other and reveal to each other. So it's a great gift to get to tell stories about a group of characters who live in what is probably the most secretive and most paranoid bubble of silence that humankind has ever produced, which was Los Alamos during the war.
When you're working on a whole season, like Manhattan's first season just ended, and you're working as in the writer's room, blocking it all out, getting it all set, how do you know, talking about secrets and such, how do you know, okay, I need to string people along here, but I need to drop in these hints or these tips or these moments, I need to give them a big reveal here? I mean, how do you know how to layer that out over the course of a year, over the course of 5 years?
Well, one advantage that I think I had is that having spent a lot of time thinking about this show, I had a lot of plans. I had plans for 7 seasons of our show when I first sat down with the network. I could have stayed there all afternoon. Eventually, the meeting, ended, but I would have been glad to talk about these characters in the world of our show, until everybody was ready to go home. And at the same time, you get into a writer's room and you build a writer's room like a dream team. You try to fill the room with people who are smarter than you are and pay really close attention to what they have to say. And eventually we built a season that I think we all felt really proud of. And there's a lot of pre-planning, and there's a lot of happy accident, and there's a lot of intuition along the way. I mean, in a way, there's a great quote by E.L. Doctorow about writing a novel, which is, he says, writing a novel is like driving home at night. You can only see as far as your headlights, but you can make the whole trip that way. And I think the same thing is true in a way about writing a season of television, is that you have to sort of attack one problem at a time and think about the holistic and the arc of a season as well as the arc of a scene.
So in your ideal world, you're looking at a 7-year plan.
Look, I would love to keep telling these stories as long as we possibly can, but so if we can do 15 seasons and get all the way to Star Wars and Ronald Reagan, I'd be thrilled.
But we know there's at least a second season on the way.
That's right. Yeah, we're really excited, and we're just digging in and working through some of the writing and planning for season 2 right now.
Well, as we wrap up, we talked about Guild Awards earlier, and maybe a lot of your craft people and behind-the-scenes folks will get recognized, and I feel like several will over the next couple of months. What about, have you done any work with the Golden Globe folks? We all know historically that they are the most welcoming group to a new show.
They are, and I have a huge amount of respect for the Hollywood Foreign Press Association. I mean, I think they're really welcoming to new shows, and I think they have really discerning taste. We had a press conference with John Benjamin Hickey for the HFPA that was really great and fun, and so I'm very hopeful.
I think so. I mean, Masters was there last year, and I believe Michael got in there, and of course Lizzie went on to an Emmy nomination later on, a few months later. So I think it's definitely a possibility. SAG, you never know. Sometimes SAG likes to hang on to things for many, many years, even beyond their sort of expiration dates. But hopefully they'll recognize you as well. What about just internally, people you know in the industry that have watched the show? What have they said to you?
It's been really cool. I mean, look, the show's a huge labor of love for me. It's a labor of love for hundreds of people. That's the single best thing about my job, is when you have this dream and then a bunch of people who are really smart and talented choose to share that dream with you. And I mean, it sounds kind of cornball, but it's really true. It's a great gift to have people invest their talents into it. So The idea that other people within the industry and beyond have really responded to the show in the way that they have, and love it as much as I do. That's sort of gravy. I mean, it's really gratifying and exciting. In terms of the awards stuff, I think there's a reason why I became a pencil-necked writer and not a professional athlete. I was never very good at sports or cared for them all that much. So I'll leave the handicapping to those who are better suited to it. But what I can say is it's been really exciting and meant a lot to us that within the industry people have really recognized our show in the way that they have.
Well, we love all this award stuff. We do so much of it. We've got you in our prediction center, and people are marking their, doing their odds and statistics and all that right now. But we know from your level, from the level of the people that work on the shows, that's not the end game. But it sure is fun when you do get recognized.
A very cool thing. I certainly couldn't argue with that, for sure.
Well, thank you so much for a great first season. We know you're probably already working on season 2, at least. Mentally and writing and getting it all kind of organized, and what will be the timeline for that going into production and then being on the air?
We're just in the process of resolving all that right now. So ask me again in about a week. But
it's that close to knowing some actual dates.
Absolutely, yeah. But the writers, I and Dusty Thomason, who's another executive producer and writer on the show, we're back in the salt mines. So our break from 1944 atomic physics was a relatively brief one. We're glad to be called back to service.
Exactly. You always like a break, but you're always thankful to go right back to work.
That's exactly right.
Listen, thank you so much, Sam. Really appreciate it. Good luck with everything, and we'll be watching season 2 as well.
It was a great pleasure talking. Thanks so much.
Let me end the